Okay, so today we get to talk about a book that Ginny Urick wrote, Homeschooling. You're doing it right just by doing it. I feel like there's a lot of buzz around this book right now as we're heading into the next school year. And I love this. I love what Ginny Urick does. I love her message. Her book, Until the Streetlights Come On, was super impactful. You guys know we're a huge fan of 1,000 Hours Outside. And I think her messaging is something that parents need to hear. Today, though, I wanted to kind of break down as I'm coming at this book from a little different perspective in that Elisha and I were both homeschooled. Ginny Urick was not. And so we were homeschooled, and then we're also homeschooling our children. And I think some of the chatter I've heard surrounding this book, I feel like maybe what Ginny is saying and what is being taken away are two different things. And I think that can kind of be to the detriment of homeschoolers. So I kind of wanted to go through and play devil's advocate on a few things here and maybe just talk through how things could maybe be taken in this book the wrong way or taken away that is actually unhelpful for our kiddos. So anyways, with that being said, I'm excited to dive into it. It's a great read, but I'm going to give a little different perspective in this episode. So if you enjoy it, give this a thumbs up. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thank you for sharing, leaving reviews, leaving your comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are down below. If you've read the book, your thoughts on homeschooling, all of that. And we'll dive into today's episode.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
All right, before we get started, we did want to let you know that Voberg Music Academy is still running its back to school campaign. That's right. We're going to talk about it once again. And if you go over to Voberg Music Academy and you use the coupon code below, you get 20% off your first month. So if you or if your children want to learn, or if you want your children to learn the piano, guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele, check out the link below. You can go through our different course options. We've got from very, very, very beginner all the way up to, I'd say, intermediate to advanced right now because of the course levels on our platform. And then also there are people that are more and more advanced joining because we run contests they like being a part of, and they like being a part of the community. And they also just like learning new songs and new arrangements, whether or not it's below their skill level or at their skill level. There's just always so fun learning new songs that our great teachers teach on VobergMusicAcademy.com. So check that out below. Now, Katie, back to the episode.
Okay. So if you guys know anything about me, I'm not really someone that is a fan of everyone gets a ribbon. And so just in the subtitle, you're doing it right just by doing it. I can't buy it, but I do think it's a good provocative title. I think it's and I love a good provocative title. I think it makes you want to read it, right? It made me want to read it. So I am supportive of the title, although I kind of disagree with that claim, because I kind of think of it in terms of, when people talk about big families, I'm a huge fan of big families. And yet when people I don't, I guess, believe the common lies about big families, like, oh, if you have more kids, there's not enough love to go around or things like that. But on the flip side, when people say, yeah, it's going to all turn out okay, I'm kind of like, whoa. No, like having more children does mean having more responsibility. There are more souls under your care, and we have to get better. I do think that that's a part of what God is calling us to, is this working hard and this intentionality and this getting better. So I don't think shirking that responsibility is beautiful, but I also think we have to grow, or otherwise we can absolutely screw things up. And I feel that way with homeschooling. I think there's so much opportunity in homeschooling. It is such a gift. We're huge fans. I mean, we've considered other things for our children and have always come back to, there's no way, we'd rather homeschool.
Yeah, for a variety of reasons. The fact that we were both homeschooled and loved it. We loved our childhood. We're really grateful for the life we get to live now, that we do feel like we're not in part, but because of the skills and the tools and the opportunities we were given and capabilities we were given through our homeschool career or our homeschool experience. And so I think there are things we want to grow on in how we're homeschooling our children, but I am blown away with what I get to do with my life. And I just point back to my mom sacrificing and working heartily to equip me and my 9 siblings. I mean, she had 10 kids. Your mom had 11 children. And they just worked tirelessly to equip us, to give us capabilities, to, launch us into the world. And I don't think you or I are taking that lightly. Like, we're not, willy-nilly saying like, oh, homeschooling was fun. It looked easy. It was no big deal. I think we're viewing it as, I hope, in a very sober-minded way, where it's like, okay, like this, is it our best? Is it our favorite option? It is. But yeah, we probably don't view it in regards to the subtitle of that book, right? Like, well, we're doing it right just because we're doing it. That's not at all how we view homeschooling. I think we're very serious about it. And we do think that you can do it wrong.
Yeah. Like, it comes with a lot of responsibility, homeschooling. So it comes with a lot of opportunity, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility. I might say maybe like homeschool, it is what you make it. But that'd be a totally different book. So the whole concept, you're doing it right just by doing it. Again, I think it draws you in. But I also think it is a fallacy in that it's not salvation, right? There's not one way to do homeschool. There are many ways to homeschool well and to do it right, but there all are definitely ways to do it wrong. And I would say, we'll touch on that in a little bit. One quote in here. What did I even do with the quote? Oh man, I left it.
Well, before you find that, what's funny is that, and again, this is all preface here because, I mean, overall, you've told me you really enjoyed the book.
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Love the book.
Yes. Love it.
Love Ginny's work and everything that she's like. We're huge fans, right? Like we couldn't stop talking about the 1,000 Hours Outside.
We still do.
Movement.
She changed our life.
She changed our life. So very great. Yeah. And when Until the Street Lights Come On, right? Like very impactful book. Growing up as a homeschooler, it was funny because that was the community that we were in. And so we got to see a wide array and a variety of styles and different levels of intentionality or lack thereof. And I don't know if this was the case in other circles, but kids, so it's like there was the homeschoolers that we were around, and that was because our parents didn't want to put us in the public school. They wanted to give us a Christian education. They wanted to bring us up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and teach us, when we lay down, when we rise up, and just throughout our life. And even within that mission, there was a variety of ways in how people applied it. Then there was a whole other group of homeschoolers that I played sports with or that I knew. And it's because they got kicked out of public school, and they has been suspended numerous times for whatever activities. And, that they were technically homeschooled, right? That's how they were viewed in the state's eyes. And clearly that was not an optimal situation, right? They didn't have parents that were being intentional. Both their parents worked. They were just kind of left to their own devices at home. And those were situations where it's like, man, it was probably, and these were non-Christian kids, right? These were kids that were not in Christian homes. And you're thinking like, well, clearly that's not an ideal homeschool situation right there. I know that's being extreme. That's not who she's speaking to here. But I do think, again, just from what I've read of the book and heard about it, I think this is a great book for people that are public schooling their kids. Because I think it sheds a lot.
Yes.
Because I think it sheds a lot of light on what takes place in the public school and just kind of that all the how the public school fails our children. And so that is something that I'm really grateful for, that she really sheds light on that. If you're already homeschooling your children, you probably already believe a lot of those things and you're saying amen. But perhaps, we could use a little bit more of a kick in the pants more than anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's great. I do think it's for someone considering homeschooling, I think it's phenomenal. I think if you're in your first year of homeschooling or something like that, I think Jenny does a great job in giving you courage to continue taking steps forward. And I think that that's beautiful. But, it says here, teacher Tom Hobinson wrote, and I'm quoting here in the book, but this is Tom's quote. He says, "I'm comfortable knowing that children are learning because they are playing, and that's enough." And when I read that quote, I go, okay, well, it's enough for teacher Tom, but who is it enough for? I think, is it enough for the children? Because there are a lot of homeschooled kids that I know that are now adults, that are bitter at their parents because they don't feel like they're prepared for the real world. And obviously we can be victims. We've talked about this on the podcast for numerous reasons. We can choose to point back and say, hey, because of this, I'm failing at life, at some point we just have to take responsibility for our actions. But I would be really disappointed if my children look back at their education and go, well, mom said playing was enough, but I really felt hindered in being prepared for the real world. And I think that it just, sometimes homeschooling doesn't end up being about the children. It ends up being about us as the educators and how we feel. And I think that, say, a generation ago, homeschoolers had a lot to prove. And maybe it wasn't even about the children, but moms had a lot to prove. And so their kids were grade levels ahead. The stereotypical homeschool family, the kids were reading ahead, grade levels, they were math levels ahead. They were wearing, collared shirts and loafers and looking like little nerds. And the moms were like, I am going to crush this. And maybe it was for her pride and her ego. And the kids just kind of happened to get that. But I think now as homeschoolers, we don't have anything to prove. And we see a lot of sloppiness, laziness. Kids are, we're going to get into timelines here in a second. The kids are grade levels behind. And it's a totally different set of issues that we're dealing with today. And but it can be how we feel as moms. Do we feel good about it? Do we not feel good about it? Instead of, okay, what is setting our kids up for the best future?
Yeah. And I mean, anytime you go to read any book that is, non-fiction or nonfiction, you probably do have to consider your goals. Like, so when you're raising your children, hopefully you're revisiting your goals on a regular basis, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do we want for our children? How do we want to equip them? What do we want them to value? What do we want their value hierarchy to be, their value system? And so that's going to look different in each and every home. Because you even mentioned like, oh, they're behind in grades. Well, depending on your attitude towards the standardization of the public school, you might not give a rip. Like that might be points 4. You're kind of like, well, yeah, the whole grade system's a scam. And so I'm grateful that my kids aren't, jumping through those hoops and playing by those rules. However, it is still standards are standards. Like we live in a standardized world. And so as much as I've been grateful for some of the more entrepreneurial books I've read that have really, I guess, given me confidence because I was not great academically. I didn't have this history of good, I guess a good track record in academics. I appreciated some of the business books that were like, hey, this standardization stuff, like is putting you in a box. You actually are gifted over here. You judge a fish by how well it, climbs a tree and it's going to look like a failure. And so I was grateful for that attitude. But at the same time, we still live in a world that has standards, and and a lot of those standards are like public schoolers still get an education. Like it's easy to throw everybody that's coming out of the public school, or not throw the kids under the bus, but maybe throw the system under the bus. But they are learning things there, right? They're learning, and again, we don't like a lot of the things they're learning, but they are learning mathematics. They are learning some level of reading. And they are learning some things that actually are useful in the world. And so you can't just assume that by homeschooling, those things are automatically going to happen in the home. Yeah,
I actually wanted to touch on that real quick. So when it comes to, let's start with this foreword real quick, because sure. Joel Salatin wrote the foreword, again, hero of just the world. Okay. Love this guy. So love his forward, but I think that there is one way to take this that I've heard some moms take it. And I'm like, I think that's not correct. Okay. So he talks about how right off in the forward, his son was very slow to read until he was like 10 or 11 or 12 years old. And then all of a sudden he decided that he was going to read. Something happened in his life. It triggered that I'm going to learn how to read. And within a month, he learned how to read. Okay. Joel Salatin had exposed him to reading before that, but his son just wasn't interested. And then on the flip side, he says, our daughter, meanwhile, was like me, early reader, took to it like a duck to water. And I think this totally aligns with the Charlotte Mason's perspective here, or a philosophy, which is expose our children. We lay the feast to our children and they take what they want when they are ready. But it doesn't mean we don't put any food on the table.
Or prepare the food.
Yes.
Yeah, present the food.
So we are laying a feast for our children consistently, daily. And when they're ready, maybe it's 10 years old, maybe it's 4 years old, they take it. But what I see right now is so many moms, either they're overwhelmed or they're burdened or they're stressed or they're lazy, or, there is that too. They aren't laying the feast because they think, you know what? I'll just get around to that later. Like my kid isn't taking off with reading because I sat down with them for a week. They didn't really, gravitate towards it. So I'm just going to stop laying that feast and we'll pick it back up. This kid learned to read when he's 10. Maybe I'll pick it up then. And I actually see a lot of kids missing their window of when they are intrigued and they are ready to learn and they're starving. There is no feast on the table. Yeah. And so that's something that I just really want to encourage mothers in is I don't hear him saying here, don't teach your children to read till they're 10. They'll pick up a book and teach themselves when they're ready. It is lay that feast. He didn't not present reading to his daughter at a younger age and just say, you know what, my son didn't take to it till he's 10. I'm not going to present it till she's 10, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we are highly motivated. Here we are, our oldest is 8 years old. So we are such seasoned home educators. But we are like highly motivated to not let children fall through the cracks because even though we're well aware, because this happened in my home and it happened in your home, like people took to musical instruments or to reading or to mathematics at different ages. And it also ended up with different capabilities too. But like my mom did her best to give us the opportunity, like you said, in this consistent way, right? At certain ages. And I do think that is at least giving the child an opportunity to grab hold of it and to get that momentum going. Cause I mean, that is a real thing. Like I see it happen, especially in music where it just feels like you're pushing a rope. You probably experience it a lot more than I do, Katie, in math and in reading with the kids, but it can feel like you're not making any progress. And then there are those breakthrough moments, but the breakthrough moments happen because you were pushing, you were putting the effort in. And so I just want to remember that with each and every one of our children. Yeah.
And you use that word pushing, but even if it's just presenting the information consistently, we don't even have to push our kids into it. But just don't stop presenting your kids with information is what I would encourage you to do. In chapter 2, one of the things you are doing right just by homeschooling is you're allowing for individual timelines. And I would say on the flip side of this, if you take the time and effort it takes to expose your children, you're allowing for individual timelines. But I see a real villainization of early education right now. And some kids love academics at an early age. And they just, and I guess those timelines are being villainized for children. And I get it. It's a shift from the public school pushing these standardized tests and all these things on kindergartners and first graders and stressing them out and giving them anxiety and all that stuff and stressing out parents in the process. But I think that the sad thing is children that would have a quicker timeline are waiting on the mother.
Right.
And I think something on, let me see, where did I see this? Yeah, sometimes children are just waiting on the parents. And I actually think this is a really big weakness in homeschooling, especially when moms have a lot of kids. It's really hard to keep up sometimes with your children, and your children are actually ahead of you. And we want to feel like we're doing something good for our kids by being on a slower timeline. But sometimes they would like a faster timeline than what we are giving them. I think here on page 40, Jenny mentions that homeschooled kids wait only for themselves. And I would say maybe, but a lot of the times they're waiting on their moms and they're waiting on their siblings. And so I just think it's a good thing to be aware of. This potentially homeschooled kids are waiting only on themselves, but potentially we're the ones really dragging them down.
And again, you can easily get into the gap homeschooling will put you in the gap, right? It really will. And we're talking about the whole gap and the gain, that Dan Sullivan principle, because right now I've got, with my 6 children, actually not the 2 youngest probably, but with the 4 oldest, they will take anything I throw at them. And they love it. And when I say take anything I throw at them, whether that's music lessons, learning a sport, taking them for a hike, sitting down and reading with them, and I love it. I love doing it, but obviously I only have so many hours. You're the one pouring the bulk of your day into them, and yet they are so receptive. They really are sponges right now, and they don't just want to, I guess. Like, do they play a ton? Absolutely. They go out into the woods and they they climb trees and, build forts.
Build butterfly houses for hours.
All the time. Yeah, it's part of their daily routine. And yet if I'm like, hey, let's do some of your wood burning right there. Like, oh man, they can do it for hours and hours and hours. Right. Or even if it's a work project and I'm working with them, they're like, hey guys, it's time to organize the shop down here. They will go to the bitter end and they'll be ready for more, even, at the bitter end.
Or your fiddle. Anytime you say, hey, get your fiddle out real quick, they're just like, oh, wow. And then one gets it out and then all four have their fiddles out and are just waiting in line, to show you what they can do.
Right. I think children are eager, especially when they're with their parents, to learn things. Like life is really new and exciting to them. Everything's new. Everything's interesting, especially if you present it that way, right? If you present fiddle practice time as punishment, or if you present math time or academics as punishment, like, well, hey, if you do enough, then you can go, do what you actually want to do. We'll go do the fun stuff. Then that's how they will view it. But I don't know. I'm saying that to say your kids, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. And yet I also feel like I think it's really hard to actually stay out ahead of them.
I do too.
I think it might be impossible.
I think it might be. And I think that Jenny presents that learning could be this wonderful, incredible experience. It can look so many different ways. And I love how she gives so many examples of that in this book. But I think something that's not really talked about is, for instance, I'm going to take this statement here. In traditional educational settings, she's saying away from external pressures and distractions from traditional education settings, allowing children the space to explore, learn, and grow at their own pace and in their own way. I think that we immediately think, oh, they need to grow slower or in this kind of whimsical roundabout way. I think that's how this is taken often. And it has only been my experience that I cannot stay out in front of my kids. So I just want to present that as like a different perspective to this is sometimes that can be the issue.
Yeah, at their own pace is way faster than what I can facilitate. Exactly.
And I found that to just be the case with every single one of my children.
This is my first time saying this, so I don't know if it's like going to sound crazy or not, but I do think children, like they've got more of that purity, right? They've got more of that, I think, original archetype. They are sinful and they definitely sin, right? We need to train that. But I really don't think they are as tainted by the world as adults are, right? Yet with experiences. And I think they've got more of a clear conscience. And I think that they are kind of they're an archetype, I think, of how God originally designed us to work 6 days, to take pleasure in our work, to enjoy our work, right? To really find it fulfilling and satisfying, and then to rest that one day. Because our children, they just love, and again, I know people will say, well, play is a child's work. And I do think that is a part of their work, right? Like they really enjoy that. But also work is work for them. And also learning things is work for them. And I see such a drastic difference in each of the four oldest especially. I'd say even our fifth born as well. Such a drastic difference in their demeanor, their attitudes, just their spirit, if you will, when we have structured, productive days. They like themselves more. They're far more obedient. They get along with each other way, way better. And then we will have days, and this happens even on our rest days. If we fail to plan our rest days, we will realize they like having things to do. They want to have things to do. They find a satisfaction in that. And I think that's just innate in humans, right? And then over time, I think that kind of gets worked, it works its way out of us with laziness and sluggardness and apathy. And then you're questioning everything and all you want to do is just sit around and watch something, right? Or just whatever. Like you don't want to be productive. But I think children are a more pure form of how God intended us to operate. And that is being busy about work and taking pride in it and taking joy in it.
Yeah, I do love how Jenny focuses on just the beauty of when kids are given open space and free time, they can be so creative, even when they're given boredom, that can be a gift to our children and they're able to come up with things to do. But in a 12-hour day that maybe 13 hours or 14 hours that my children are awake, for them to have maybe 5 hours of unstructured play, that's a lot of time. And that gives me like 8 hours I've got to plan. You know what I'm saying? Even if they have 8 hours of play, like a full play day, that still has 5 hours where I need structure. And I do think that coming out of the public school system, they are heavy on the structure and light on the play. But then I think in and again, a reaction to that, we villainize any structure, and we don't realize that kids really crave that too. It gives them boundaries. It gives them this comfort knowing of what's next. And
also quantifiable accomplishment, because that's another quote of Joel Salatin is he says, children need to be able to successfully complete meaningful tasks. I cut you off. I apologize.
No, that is so great. I'm so glad you brought that up.
But I think that structure can give them that, like they're successfully completing meaningful tasks.
Yeah. If everything is arbitrary, if everything's subjective, if everything's based only on their timeline. And again, that's not what I'm saying Jenny's saying. I'm saying this is how often sometimes this encouragement gets taken. Kids do not have a sense of I accomplished something today and I feel good about it because there was no standard for accomplishment. And so all I'm saying is I do think it's a both and situation. I think our kids need tons of all this open-ended stuff, but I also think even us as adults, we get decision fatigue when we have to make every single decision every single day. And as a parent, you can really relieve some of that stress that comes from your children by structure and by giving these consistent benchmarks for kids to hit. They find a lot of confidence in that. So that's just another side that I think doesn't get really talked about in the homeschooling space because we're trying to paint the beauty of the open-ended side of homeschooling and contrast that with this rigid structure for 7 hours of our kids' day in a public school system.
Yes.
But not all structure is bad. And I think it's unfortunate that that gets villainized while trying to highlight the beauty and the open-endedness that we have with homeschooling.
Yeah. I will say though, what makes me sad is like driving by like an elementary school when they're on recess and they're just like in this fenced in area, or kids going like waiting for the bus at 7:20 or whenever the bus picks them up. And so again, I think this is a great book for people that are, considering public school or that maybe they're considering homeschooling. Because boy, that'll just kind of ruin my day when I see what the way young kids have to live in the public school.
Yes, it is not ideal. It is not ideal. And Jenny does a great job pointing out some of those things. Something, we talk about timelines. You mentioned grade levels. In some ways, these are very subjective timelines that someone came up with at some point and standardized what a child's education should be when. The funny thing is that at this time in history, we actually have very low benchmarks for things. So in terms of what kids have learned in different time periods. So I don't think it's crazy, the standardization that we have, but I do think it can come with a lot of stress for parents in the way that we're trying to achieve these goals or these benchmarks. But I think something that Jenny points out here is it's not uncommon for these timelines to leave lifelong stigmas. And she mentions as a math teacher, she had so many kids come into her classroom and say, I'm not good at math, but it wasn't true. They just decided in, third or fourth grade, they were not good at math. And I think maybe what Jenny's trying to point here to as the issue is these timelines that we have. But I would argue that some of this is just innate. Like we can't get away from it. It's not the public school system that's creating these timeline stigmas. It's just most kids learn how to read between 6 and 8. And so a child that is 10 years old is looking around himself and everybody knows how to read. And it's not so much that the public school system has decided that's the good time for children to learn how to read. It's just that kids are very capable of that at that point in most cases. And so people feel left out or they feel behind just because it's happening. So even as a mom, we could say, it doesn't matter, you can learn to read when you're 15 and all that's true. But I would say that I'm encouraged to keep up with certain timelines because of those stigmas. I don't want my kids thinking they're bad at math. And so because of that, we are actually hyper-focusing on math to hit certain benchmarks at certain ages because their identity is being formed by those around them. Even as homeschoolers, it's not like they aren't just immune to the fact that other kids are going to be in a different grade level and they're behind. And so I can tell them as their mom, everybody, it's a joke that your mom is just going to love you no matter what you do. But kids have in their own minds this comparison with other kids. And we can't totally take that away by homeschooling or by moving to another county or whatever the case may be. It's just there. We can't help it.
It happens if they just have one sibling.
Yeah.
because that one sibling is going to be picking something up quicker than them probably. And they're going to have more of this, natural inclination to where and see quicker success. But you are right, whether that's at church, in your homeschool community, and you might not even discuss grades, right? You could decide to not, we're not using grades. We're not saying it's third grade or fifth grade or whatever grade. They'll just see the math problems that their kids are doing, or they'll see the books that they're reading, and stuff will come up, and they will, and again, this is going to happen for various things in life, right? You can't control, like our kids are probably going to play way more music than most of the kids that they're around, right? And then a lot of our friends are going to play way more sports than what our kids are playing. And so they could be like, man, I'm not as good at, like they're all so good at basketball. It's like, well, yeah, you don't play basketball. So the whole comparison or, putting different labels on yourself, I think is somewhat inevitable, but I do think as parents, we want to mitigate it as best we can, and also not put titles and labels on kids. And that is the opportunity that we have as homeschoolers, because that's like another terrible thing I think about public schools is that labels do get placed on children at such a young age. And that really is unfortunate. I do agree with what you're saying. It's somewhat inevitable, like even in other environments. But it's so hyper, I guess, pervasive in the public school, whether it's gifted or, delayed, or like you get that in like second grade and you're like, come on, just give them a chance,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
give them a
like
second.
Development happens differently for different kids. Like, I totally believe all that. I'm not saying, stress yourself out or put pressure on yourself to get to a certain place. I'm just saying maybe a different perspective on this whole timeline thing is some timelines we can't get around. And so learning to work with the timeline and actually have the timeline enforce in a good way.
That's kind of accountability.
And identity, have it. I mean, yeah, that's great too. But having it enforce an identity in our children with them thinking, I'm good at reading. I'm good at math. Like the timelines can serve us.
Right.
And I only hear them presented as this evil villain, but our kids are so capable. And so I'm not doing it to keep up with the Joneses. It's okay if one of our kids is further behind than another child or whatever. But I do like that when children are in front of timelines or hitting timelines, they are proud of themselves and they feel confident.
Yeah. And
I think that that's something that sometimes we overlook as parents.
Yeah. I just think, again, as humans, because we were created to work, we've talked, or maybe we haven't talked about it, but I think I wrote a Substack on it, and that is like this pushback against finding our identity in our work, especially for men. It's just kind of like, hey, like we shouldn't find our identity in our work. And I agree, it shouldn't be in our career or even in our job. But I actually do think that we were created to work. God works, right? He worked 6 days and created, and then he rests on the seventh, and we're created in his image. And so it's really natural and actually God honoring for us to have our identity on some level in our work. Is it in Christ first and foremost? Yeah, but like when we're living as Christians, or when we're being Christ-like, or being sanctified, then we're working as unto him. And so I think putting identity in our work is a good thing. I think children get that at a young age. They're realizing, oh, I am created to work, and they want quantifiable progress. And I think that those timelines can be votes for their identity in that. And it can be for the things that you deem to be of value. Right. Like whether that's, we like the arts, and we like, literature, and we're focusing hard on math, probably because you and I were both not math people. But it's going to be different for each family. But I think children have a strong longing to be able to quantify something that they've accomplished. I'd say like on a daily basis, right? Like it's just when you lay your head down to sleep, kind of like, oh, I accomplished this thing. And I want to give that to our children. Yeah,
it might be taking care of animals. It might be helping with the work on the farm. It might be cleaning up. But if everything is totally open-ended and totally self-directed, they don't feel that same sense of accomplishment. Also, there's a quote here, earlier is not better. And I underlined that because I think that's such a popular statement in homeschooling. I don't know what it's quite stemming from.
There's that old book, like early's better than late.
Yeah, she brings it up. Better late.
Oh, better late than early. Yeah.
And I just kind of think, for who, I don't think it's right to force things on children. I think their developmental process is a little more complex than just taking their marching orders and doing what we say. But I do think, like, for some kids, earlier is better. Straight up. Like I loved reading as a very, very, very little girl. And earlier was better for me. You know, I think for some kids, earlier is better. And I think a more accurate statement is straight up better late than never. Okay. And
go back to the original.
I think that's a little more tried and true. And I'm excited to read this book because it's come up so many times. I know it was really encouraging to your mom. But Lisa was homeschooling a lot of children and quite a few of them were dyslexic. And so I do think you have to stick in with like teaching older children to read. And this better late than early concept can make you feel better about where you're at, you know, and say, hey, it's okay. But I do think a more accurate statement is better late than never. It is better that they learn to read at 15 than they don't learn to read at all. So like stick in it.
Yes.
But this whole delayed education thing, again, I know it's based on probably studies and stuff, but in my experience, young kids can really love learning and academics. I also think it doesn't take into account the complexity of big families because I have seen this over and over and over again. And as a young family, I knew I didn't want it to be us. We started very earlier than I would even recommend with our little kids, teaching them to read at 3 years old because we were having kids so fast. And I was like, I don't want to wait until my oldest is 8 to start this.
And then
I've got a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Yes.
Like it backs up. Like you get backed up down the line.
Right.
And so I think that's something that people don't equate or, you know, like really think about when you're thinking better late.
You're thinking it's going to get easier. Maybe you're like, it'll be easier.
Like life gets more complex.
Right.
And so if you have a lot of kids, you have a lot of kids close together, like, yeah, your kids might learn it faster at 8 or 9 or something like that. But like, it was relieving for me to work on the ABCs and reading and have a couple kids reading so then I could be working on my next ones. And my younger children, I have started later because I'm not stressed. I'm only teaching one at a time now. We have a plan. I was also a new homeschooling mom and I was like, I want a year or two of wiggle room to mess up or find something I don't like or take longer if I want. And I see a lot of moms wait till late and then stress out, right? It's supposed to take all the stress off, but stress out because they're like, okay, my child is not reading and what I'm doing is not helping.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think
there's not much margin there too.
That's something that doesn't get baked into the equation. For me, it was much less stressful to start earlier because of our family dynamics and what I'd seen. So just take that into account. Again, these are all things that I don't think negate anything that Jenny's saying here, but it's kind of another side to the coin.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if she gets into this in the book, but I know we've mentioned unschooling and kind of that whole movement. I think the 1,000 hours outside movement was so powerful because her messaging wasn't like, get them out of literature, get them out of music, get them out of the arts, get them out of mathematics and get them outside. It really was like, hey, get them away from the screen. Like let's replace outdoor, free time out there, them exploring and being creative. Let's replace let's replace screen time with that. And I think that is like how that should be viewed is like children do so much better when they're taking time away from the screen and they're outdoors. But oftentimes I think you can be like, okay, this is just like all these things are created equally. And so it's like, we can do outdoor time, screen time, academics. It's like, no, I think that like a lot of the heart of that movement was like, this is so much better than this. And then they you can easily apply that kind of like to everything. Well, it's just better. It's just better that we do this over anything. You're kind of like, well, no, I think it's better than this other thing. Exactly.
Like outdoor time is better than a screen. And what I see, again, what was tempting for us and what I think is tempting for a lot of families is we stress out when we don't have all this structure. And so what do? We turn on media for structure.
Right.
And Jenny talks about that in the book. I love how she doesn't pull any punches when it comes to media. I think something that I think is phenomenal actually as kind of a litmus test for how much screen time our kids are having. And she says, how many screen time conversations are you having? And I think that is so good because like when we watch a movie with our kids, they talk and talk and talk about that movie for about 2 weeks. Like maybe our kids just talk about the movie because it's the one movie they see. I don't know, but they're quoting the movie and they're bringing it up and it's applying to everything. And it's funny because it's always a reminder to us, like, we aren't going to watch another movie for a while, because it's like, that's what all the conversations are about. And so if kids are constantly bringing up movie lines or applying things to movies or shows or all those things, we might say, or our kids don't watch screens that much, or we don't prioritize screen time or something like that. But it kind of shows where they're spending their time, what they're talking about. So it's like, I love when my kids are talking about ideas, jobs that they're coming up with, what they're actually doing outside,
their friends,
schoolwork, their friends. But when the conversations are screen related or media related, it's kind of like, oh, maybe, that's becoming too big of a part of life. So I think we use screens, though, as structure in our days, because when we lack structure, and in that case, academics is 100% a better way to go if you're trying to add in structure to your day, because everybody's going crazy. Something I think Jenny puts in here that I think is incredible, great examples of just being an intentional parent and laying a feast for your children. Again, I think might get taken the wrong way. One of those is, she mentions her boys play in a homeschool basketball league. That takes time. That takes effort. That is a structure she's signing her kids up for. She also she mentioned these individual interests that she wanted her kids to pursue. One of her sons said rocks. So she didn't just go to the library one week and get books on rocks and forget about it. She went and actually signed up her entire family for this rock club. And I'm going to totally butcher the story. You got to get the book and read it. But she talks about how it was all adults, but she went in there with all her little kids, and they had these structured meetings. They had to present there. They were seriously learning about rocks. Okay. And she mentions how one night they go to, I think it was Lake Superior, and they end up searching for one of these rocks that they had learned were on the beach. And they found this really rare rock, and it glows in the dark, and it's super cool. And she was saying, this is how kids learn. This is real life. And I think what people are going to take from that is potentially just go outside and hang out. But
go find glowing rocks.
But here's the deal. The kids didn't even know about that rock. They actually learned about that rock in a structured, educational environment.
Highly intentional.
Yeah, that was highly intentional. One, she was being a highly intentional mother. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. But two, this was a form of structure and systemization, and these things that kind of get villainized these days in the homeschool world. The kids learned there, and then they went and applied that knowledge out in the great outdoors. And I see a lot of that in our home. Charlotte Mason is big on this. She has kids do seat work, and then they go out and they apply it, and they see how all the dots connect out in the real world. So I really think it's a both and concept. Kids don't know what they're missing when they're out in the world, and they haven't been, they can pick up stuff there, but it can be enhanced by seat work.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a great example, because again, I know she's probably not speaking directly to the unschooling, but unschooling is one of the most time intensive things for parents to actually when you're just following their interests and then giving them resources to make gains in that interest. That is to me, a very committed, and some parents do that very well, right? They crush it, but it is not like a less intensive form of schooling. I think it's more time intensive, and it requires more intentionality than what, more systemized, structured forms.
Yeah. Another example of Jenny and her husband's intentionality was they launched a small line of branded t-shirts as a family so they could allow their kids to be part of a very small business. Again, this isn't just like a lemonade stand one weekend. This is an ongoing life lesson. It's just not what I see a lot of people doing when they read
launching
this stuff.
A physical product with an online, through an online, it's so much work getting it from conception, getting a product from conception to market. You read about it and you're like, oh, that sounds so nice, but that's a ton of time.
Yes.
But put into that.
Okay. So this statement, I am just going to disagree with, which, this is an opinion. I can do this. The capacity to think critically and adapt doesn't arise from seat work, period, ever, period. And I just disagree with that statement. I think that Jenny's actually a very highly educated woman. She has her master's. She speaks to getting a very prestigious piano school where she was practicing for 3 or 4 hours a day to get into it. She was very disciplined, very structured, very just very educated. And I do think that our kids' ability to focus, to follow through with things that require a lot of effort over a long period of time, working through those plateaus of boredom when it's not fun and exciting, working through those walls that you hit and you're like, you know what, I just want to quit and give up. I think Jenny experienced that over the course of her education and maybe doesn't realize how much.
Doesn't appreciate it.
How much, that happened. Because again, to her, it's just, she kind of sees it as, at least in the interviews I've heard, this like, well, this was all this way. And then I went to go on to launch a business and do stuff totally different than my math major, right? But the point is that I don't have to be doing, I wish I'd known this as a kid. I don't have to be doing an algebraic equation to be able to be using the character development and the focus and the deep work and the problem solving and the critical thinking that I gained in those years of my high school education and my college education.
Yeah. I know it's a popular thing for people to say, oh, I never used my degree. I didn't use my degree. I've never used it one time. And I've never agreed with that statement because I didn't get to high level math in anything. I mean, I did 2 math classes in college. And I still, when I come up, maybe I've said this before, but when I come up to some problem in business, in just like organizing our shop, right? Like I can't figure out how to get the rack to fit where it's supposed to be, so that I can hang stuff on it. Like it's the exact same part of my brain that I remember activating when I'd look at a problem in math that I was like, there's no way I can do this. This doesn't make any sense. It's like I go to the same place and then you follow through. So I think that I do think we're so prone to not appreciating all the things that we've gone through.
We do this like all the time.
All the time, right? Like we've got entrepreneurial dads that were risk takers, that were always looking at new opportunities to invest in. And that comes very second nature to us. And we can easily disvalue that, right? Where we'll be like, well, yeah, anybody can do that. Or like, that's not really a thing. And I'm sure there are other things that we don't value. And so I agree with, I disagree with that statement too. I do think that you did a good job of differentiating between the application, of things learned. But book work is like in so many areas of life, I guess I just see it as being so necessary and then it benefiting so many areas of life. And the fact is that we can't get away from the fact that we still live in a society that values credentials. It values quantifiable credentials. And I think we value them. We don't even realize that we value them in ourselves, right? When we do exercises to look back in what we accomplished, like finishing a degree just means more to everybody than doing 2/3 of a degree, right? Or getting a title at a contest, like just means something because you can point back to it. And maybe you're not using you're not using that knowledge or that information. That's usually what people I think are referring to. It's like, I'm not using that information, or I'm not using the knowledge, gained there, or that skill learned when I was playing this sport. However, like you are using so much of what was developed in you throughout that process.
And I think it's funny because it's usually people that have degrees that say, I never used my degree, and they don't know how many doors it actually has opened for them when you don't have a degree. You feel it. And like Elisha you did a lot of schooling, but he didn't get a degree.
Right.
And it is funny how many avenues you've thought about pursuing as an adult.
Or jobs I've applied for.
Yes. And the degree isn't required. So Jenny mentions in here on, some job application site, only like 14% of the jobs require a degree. However, a degree is still speaking volumes to an employer that you follow through with something, that you can commit to something for a long period of time. And actually, that's something that Elisha looks for as an employer, even though he doesn't have a degree.
Like it means something to me when I see somebody finished a bachelor's degree. It could be an unrelated field. It says it says follow through, because when you are in the position of the employer, and I mean, we've got amazing people, and like they're gracious, to put time towards what we're working on.
They're all overqualified.
Yeah, they are way overqualified. But you realize that like what's so valuable is steadfastness, right? It's like stick with itness, is that they're not just going to be here for 3 months and then go find something else. And a degree, it doesn't guarantee that, but it does show you that they stuck with something for a period of time, and it wasn't just fun, and they had to go through some trials. And so you're far more willing to invest into them, because obviously it's it's an investment when you hire. And I will say this too, because this is coming from again, we probably discredit a bunch of the things that we had, but I'm just going from my personal experience when I was pursuing different jobs. And people would say things just like, well, you just need to know somebody. It's a network, your network is your net worth. And I would hound down the person I knew to get an introduction
or
to the job.
Or people would actually offer you introductions.
Yes. Be like, hey, I know so-and-so is looking for somebody for this. Can I introduce you to them? I'm like, no way. Thanks. Yeah, I'm really interested. And I always thought like, man, if I could get the interview, then I would, I'd be a shoo-in. And time again, like the other people competing for these job opportunities, like the degree meant something, even though maybe it wasn't required, right? It wasn't like some technical or, position. It still meant something. And so,
especially when you're early 20s and the job's going to require a lot of training up front,
right?
It just says something about you. And I think people take it for granted that, yeah, they did that. Maybe they went to college and just had a fun time and they're like, it wasn't really a big deal. But when you are in the entrepreneurial space, you see a lot of people floundering,
right?
Because they can't stick with something when it gets hard. And I think that we are going to see a lot of that with homeschooling that's too open-ended, that's a little too self-led. When there isn't that accountability there aren't any metrics to hit at all. There aren't, when you can quit whenever you want because, hey, it's not your interest anymore. That is something that you can take into life. And something that Jenny points out here is that so many jobs are going to require grit, creativity, focus, critical thinking, all these things. And I'm like, academics is a phenomenal way to train yourself in these things because it is lame sometimes.
Right.
And it is boring and it is hard. And I just think it's an excellent schoolmaster for life skills. She mentions here, it's a quote from Madeline Levine. It's so difficult for parents to reconsider the metrics that served them well in their own formative years, test scores, college admissions, that degree from Brown. She mentions times have changed and the metrics of success have changed as well. And I agree with that.
Yep.
But also the same things build a successful person.
Right.
A successful person a generation ago is still a successful person today. And those
it's the same habits.
It's character, it's work ethic, it's dedication. It's and I guess I see if people read this book and take it wrong, okay, then you can really end up with, there's a potential for our kids to be super lazy, honestly, to not have focus, to be super distracted and be bouncing around from interest to interest, to not end their education with true skill sets. There's just a lot of things that can go wrong when you don't have a strong academic foundation. Mm-hmm. And so this academics it has been around for forever as a training of the mind. It isn't just this arbitrary thing that in our Western culture, we're like, hey, let's just brainwash the kids for decades. Like, yeah, there are elements to our public school system that go back to communists and all this stuff, right? But if you go back to philosophers and you go back to presidents that were self-teaching Latin and Greek and all this stuff, it was for a highly trained mind, for a sharp tool that you could use. Absolutely critical thinking can be learned from seat work. And when our kids hear us talking like that, like this doesn't matter, their attitude towards it is this doesn't matter. And I think we're missing out on a real joy that can be had through academics. The culture of our home is determined by how Elisha and I are communicating about these things and what we're teaching our children. Again, she quotes Charlotte Mason here, which is just read Charlotte Mason. She's phenomenal. But she says, the question is not when a child has finished their education, how much does the youth know? It is how much does he care? And I think that she adds here, self-education is the only possible education. The rest is mere veneer laid on the surface of a child's nature. And with that taken out of context there, because obviously Jenny can't quote all of Charlotte and all her volumes. People might think, okay, education learned completely on one's own is the only education. So if our child is not learning about snails on their own, then natural sciences have no application to them. Charlotte was consistently saying the responsibility of home educators was to lay the feast. The self-education was the child learning when he was ready and taking from that feast what he deemed applicable. So you aren't saying, hey, you're going to tell me back 7 facts about these snails.
Right.
You're just going to say, hey, tell me what you learned today. It's totally open-ended, and the child's going to tell you back what stuck with them. But the responsibility of the home educator was to lay the feast, not to say, hey, Tommy, I think you are the best person to teach yourself. Go have a heyday, have an interest, do something, go outside. And I think that sometimes that's how Charlotte Mason gets perceived or practiced, and it's just a faulty philosophy. And I'm not saying that that's what Jenny was insinuating here. I'm saying that's how this gets misread.
Right. Yeah. I just think of young boys. I think myself as a young boy, like how, foolish is bound up in the heart of a child. And it is a gift to have structure, discipline, direction from our parents. It's when left to our own devices as adults, but especially as children, we really are creators of, I don't know, not great things. Like wickedness sounds so strong, but we're not, when we're left to our own devices, it usually doesn't just produce amazing results. I think as parents, we are just commanded and required to give structure, to give direction, and like you said, to lay that feast. And with whatever. And that's the thing, is that, like we mentioned, college, we're so ready for our kids to like we want them to be capable of going to college and thrive there. We love,
we aren't stressed if not all our kids get a degree. We sound like that, but I think we would let them know, hey, this isn't totally a total waste of your time.
But we've said this before, I think, on a recent episode about as homeschooling failing our kids. It's like going to a trade school isn't just nothing. Like you have to know so much to be able to go to a trade school, going and learning, even if you're going to do an apprenticeship, like you have to know something to be able to go get started there. I think just knowing that like the base level that you might have in your brain as that you're just assuming is going to happen might not happen just naturally. Like it's going to require some intentional input.
Yeah, something here. So chapter 5, I love how she brought awareness to you are modeling. And this is something I would say is not a gimme. You're doing it right just by doing it, at least for me. Okay, so maybe it is for other moms, but this is, I just put in front of it, what are you modeling? Because this was just such a convicting chapter for me. This might be the biggest problem of all in my homeschool. What am I modeling to my children when it comes to work ethic, when it comes to focus, when it comes to diligence, when it comes to time management, all these things? What is my attitude towards higher education? What's my attitude towards academics? Like all these things. How am I spending my time? Am I super lazy? Am I on media all the time? Am I gossiping? Like they're just so many pitfalls we can fall into. And for me, this was just a super convicting chapter, feeling like I'm not doing it right. Not in a bad way, but in a, I really want to grow because more is caught than taught by my kids. And the fact that I am their biggest role model and Elisha just by being here.
Wow.
I'm grateful Elisha's their father. I'll say that. Well, I'm grateful you're their role model.
Their mother, but that is so convicting on so many levels, Katie. Like, do they see us loving God's word? Do they see us like thanking him, talking to him, praying earnestly, praying without ceasing? Do they see us like once we get a free moment, jumping on a screen and just consuming? Do they see us taking joy and working heartily as unto the Lord? You do this, like you put time and energy and creativity into meals, into keeping our home. You make it a place that's beautiful and restful to be. You take care of yourself. That's another thing too, right? Like you make a point to put yourself together in the morning. I think that's showing like respect to them. It's showing respect to anybody that you're going to encounter that day. I know it shows me a lot of things. I wish I appreciate all of them.
No, I feel that way about you and your diligence in getting up early. they see you, Leon will get up early and see that you're reading the Bible and he wants to do that too. Or the kids go and they work out with you because you're getting up early and you're working out. When you go hang out with friends, you get up super early in the morning and you go do it and work out. Or, you're going to your book club. Like even your hobbies are these pursuits that are edifying. Your work all throughout the day. And then when you're done working, you get out your instruments and you play your instruments. It's just such a gift. And I'm so grateful that our kids see that. But thank you for your kind words too, because that was encouraging. Jenny mentions here that she just is thrilled to be reading certain books, different classes she's taking, just how she has this lifelong pursuit of learning. And I think that is so beautiful. I resonate with that.
Yeah, that's a goal. That's
how
definitely
learning
a goal.
is fun. And I love how she says, but only when there's freedom attached to it. And I would argue that, there's probably a lot of truth in that statement. But also with freedom comes a lot of responsibility. And I don't think that our children should be free to, like she says here, quit, divert, expand, contract, try, do, practice, and grow. All necessarily when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like, how many kids that are adults now say, oh, I wish my parents had made me stick with piano lessons. We point back and wish our parents had been that accountability for us when we didn't have the responsibility to handle the freedom.
Sure.
And so, as an adult, I feel so blessed to, it's way more fun to learn when you're free to learn.
Yeah.
But I also have, we both have study habits. We have time management habits. We stick with stuff. We do have grit. We have all these things that were built into us through a lot of years of doing things where we had no freedom.
Yeah, our parents did it for us.
Our
zero. Parents gave us those things.
Elisha's a phenomenal musician. You love music today. You just it's an incredible creativity for you. And you had no freedom to quit.
Right.
As
exactly.
a kid.
My mom held me accountable to my practice times every day.
He was 18 and he was having to practice the piano.
Right.
So I think that, learning's more fun, but some of that fun is reserved for when you're an adult.
Well, and also this is just with everything, things are fun when you're good at them. And
That's
you can't,
true.
and it's just hard to get good at things. Right. We a lot of times we don't give ourselves a chance to even get good at something. And then we say, oh, we don't enjoy it. But rarely do we enjoy things we're bad at, right? You're just like, oh, this is so fun. And so there are many things that I think a lot of people would love if they had just given themselves the chance to learn.
Yeah. I know this is a long episode. I'm just going to say one more thing here. In chapter 10, she mentions you're choosing the best teacher for your child. And again, I love that Jenny empowers parents instead of me that's just squashes the joy. No, I do think this is powerful, but I put maybe. This is a huge responsibility. And it's not just a given, just like we wanted to give our children a Christian education. And I think I assumed for a long time, because they're in our home, they're getting a Christian education. Wow. And Elisha brought up, no, they aren't. It's not just a given. She mentions here, you're instilling values and character. Maybe. Are we? Are we teaching them values and character?
Yeah, we were teaching them a value system.
Yeah, what is that? Am I reading them God's word every day? Or am I not? Is it a biblical education or am I just using, the regular standards textbooks that they could get at a public school? Right. So I think that was just kind of a challenge to me to consider, am I doing all these things that she mentions a good teacher should do? Obviously, we have a heart for our children. That is what she's pointing out here. Also, she mentions you're providing a personalized education. And I think that this is really good. I think that this can get taken too far too, though, because we live in a standardized world, whether we like it or not. And that's always been the case. There's always been metrics for success. And so we don't live in a personalized world. So while I do think for really young ages, it's beautiful to be able to have that flexibility and that patience for children's development and all these things, but this can be taken too far. And I don't want my kids to grow up thinking that the world, if they don't learn in a certain way, they just go to the person in the military or they go to their authority over them in their job and just say, hey, well, I don't do this. I'm a kinesthetic learner or whatever, it's
or even if they find a way for a career to provide a living for themselves, they're still living in the United States of America. Where it's okay, you want to buy property. Okay, you've got to pay property taxes. You want to be a part of this community. You want to be a citizen here. There's standards here. And it's not always going to align with your personality, or what your whims are that day. It's like that song that like is just, it's one of my favorite country songs, but it's the whole buy dirt, you know?
Yeah.
And it just sounds like, hey, no, stop chasing the dollar. Like, you want to know what really matters, buy dirt. And he says a bunch of awesome things.
Get married, have
a bunch of
kids.
awesome things. And you're like adding all those things up and you're like, dude, all that costs so much money,
And
like
it's really hard.
that's so hard to do. And
like so many people would love to be married. So many people would love to have kids. So many people would love to own dirt.
Property.
Like, it's actually a pretty privileged life.
It is, exactly. And so people say like, man, and I make jokes about this for myself too. Like, oh, I'm a simple guy. I just need some property, in North Idaho. And it's like, well, that's actually a huge deal. Like we worked we worked our face off to be able to buy, to be able to buy property. And I think we can easily do that with a lot of like aspirations for our kids or for ourselves. Be like, well, hey, like I just want them to fill in the blank. I'll be like, well, that's actually a lot, like that is a huge deal. 5 acres, with a home on it, like that's all you want. Okay. How are you going to make your millions, so.
Yeah, I think too, something in this chapter that I love in terms of you're choosing the best teacher for your child is I think these are beautiful affirmations, and I like how they're written. Like, you are the best teacher for a child. You are adapting to your child's learning style. You are preparing your child for a changing future. You are nurturing a lifelong learner. I love that Jenny's speaking that like hope over every mother. But when she says you're nurturing a lifelong learner, like none of these are guarantees. And I think that's just what I want to stay sharp. I want to grow. I don't want to assume that I am just the best that there is and my kids could not do better just by being alive. And this just really isn't a guarantee. She mentions that by emphasizing critical thinking, problem solving, a passion for discovery, you're preparing your child to be a lifelong learner. And while that's true, we may or may not be doing those things. And I do think that sometimes a skeptical attitude towards academics can lead to a skeptical attitude toward life. And I see this time and time again where there are kids in their teens that are just scoffers. They're scoffing at education. College is dumb. Church is dumb. Those people over there with their, shirts tucked in are dumb. Whatever the case may be, these things are dumb. And it's not necessarily this like, oh my goodness, that sounds so interesting. I'd love to check it out. They've kind of just like checked these boxes of, well, I'm not going to be interested in that stuff. Instead of like, whoa, you're really into archaeology? That's cool.
Right.
I'm interested in that too. Or you're studying Latin? Tell me about it.
Right.
Maybe they aren't studying Latin on their own, but they have this interest and they have this curiosity. Wow. And sometimes I think we're telling our kids when they're little, that stuff's dumb.
Right.
It's useless. People are wasting their time sitting on their rear end studying stuff. And it actually cannot create lifelong learners.
Yeah. And then you grow up and you're like, wait, that astronaut like did a whole bunch of math. Like I was like, that guy's awesome. Like I thought math was dumb,
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So anyways, I just think it's a good call and a good challenge to yes, not beat ourselves over the head with a stick because we are learning and we're growing and there's going to be gaps and we aren't going to do it perfectly. And I do think that homeschooling is the best route for your children. I'm a huge fan of it. But again, I think that homeschooling mothers and fathers need, yes, this encouragement. Hey, you're doing it right. But also maybe we could do it better. Maybe there is a way to fall off in the ditch here. And again, love the provocative title here though, because it really did get me going. It really made me want to read it. And I can't recommend this book enough because I went through and kind of pulled out things that I was thinking, oh, I think I've seen this get taken the wrong way in homeschooling communities, but there's so much good in this book. It is empowering as a homeschooling mother. It gives great ideas to think outside the box. And we'll link it down below for you guys. You guys listen for yourself. Something real quick. Okay. That Joel Salton said that I think is so good is he wanted to teach his kids to be sociable, not socialized. Nice. So I want them to say, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Interact with adults, not socialized, which is acting like their peers. Nice. So there's just like little stuff like that's so good. But this episode wasn't long enough to talk about all that.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.